Hey everybody, Mark Lookout here from Redline Conditioning, and today I want to cover the pull portion on the push-pull machine when it comes to the your PARE or your POPAT test. Now for most people, the pull is generally the easiest one to complete versus the push, since you can use a little bit more of your body weight and a little bit more of your legs to get the weight up and keep it up as you're performing the rotation. But having said all that, there is a tendency to still make mistakes. One of the common mistakes I see people try to make is as they're performing the rotation, there's a tendency to either there's a tendency to cut through the middle of the rotation and dropping the weight down, or as they're finishing up the rotation, relaxing a little bit and letting the weight pull themselves in or pull them in. So when you are performing the pull, you always want to make sure you stay as wide as possible, or at least keep the weight up as high as possible when you're performing the rotation. And as you get to the end, you never relax, you're always pulling back. Okay? So in terms of setup, now if you're doing the POPAT test, most likely you're going to have just a single rope handle. If you're doing the PARE, you may have the 2-rope handle. So what I'm going to talk about next is going to apply mainly to the 1-rope handle. When you are grabbing the handle itself, try to grab as high up on the handle as you can, because if you're further back here, one of the things is when you're pulling back, you're just going to be far further back, and when you're further back, you create a bigger arc, and a bigger arc means more distance to travel, which means more time to get across to the other side. So grab a little higher up on the rope handle and try to keep yourself close to the handle itself while still keeping the weight up as high as possible. Okay. So one of the things I should say not one of the things, but in terms of getting the weight up, a lot of people have the tendency to just let their body weight do the work as they bring up the weight. The thing with this though is if you just rely on body weight and lean back, you may only get the weight halfway up. But if you're aggressive with this one, pretend you're in a game of tug of war, you want to use all your legs in conjunction with your body weight. Or let's say you want to use your leg strength in conjunction with your body weight to get the weight up and the handle up as far as possible. So once you're there, you got more leeway. If you do happen to get sucked in, it's only going to drop, still above the halfway point. Whereas if you start at the halfway point and these things are dropping, well, it's close to the bottom. So be aggressive, yank it right up, treat it like a tug of war. Make sure you got control before you start the rotation. Some people will try to start the rotation before they even have the weight up, or they get the weight up but have no control and drop the weight. Now depending which test you're doing, whether it's the PARE or the POPAT, you can either shuffle your feet or you can cross over. If it's the PARE, it really doesn't matter, you can cross over or shuffle. If you're doing the POPAT, depending on where you're testing or who your tester is, actually this may apply to the PARE as well, but do get clarification of whether you can cross your feet or shuffle. Now when you're doing the pull, I find it does come down more to preference anyway, so it's not as big a deal whether you cross or shuffle compared to the push. For my personal preference, I find crossover is better compared to the shuffle, but again, that's my own personal preference. You have to find what works best for you. But if you're going to cross over, and that's why I'm going to talk first, if you're going to cross over, what you want to do is turn your hips slightly to the side. So instead of just being square to the machine the entire time and crossing your feet, doing it this way is actually quite awkward. But if you were to turn your hips, but still keep your shoulders square to the machine, then it's almost like walking forward versus just crossing the feet across, or just crossing the feet in front of your body. So if you're going to do a crossover, turn those hips, and it's almost like you're walking with it. Now the shuffle method Stay square to the machine the entire time. And as you're pushing across, try to take big steps and quick steps versus just tiny little steps like so. If you do tiny little steps, it takes you a little bit longer to get across, and just means holding on to the weight longer than necessary. So, if you're shuffling, take those big steps. Now just bring it back to the crossover. You can still take those big steps as well. So if I'm crossing over, I don't want to take tiny little steps either. I want to take big ones. Because big ones cover a lot more distance. Alright? So, if you got any questions, you can always email me at redline.conditioning@gmail.com, or feel free to drop a comment below. But otherwise, for everyone in the process, good luck.